Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Whittier. I'm a student journalist from the University of East Anglia, and today I have with me Paula Toledo. Paula, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone. My name is Paula Toledo, and I'm founder of Ode to Wonder. I'm a well-being consultant, and essentially, I'm dedicated to fostering social connection and building places of belonging in workplaces and education, as well as art institutions through social prescribing. And I'm also a singer-songwriter and lost wave artist.
Now, Paula, you have done so much work in the well-being space, and we have time to get to all of that. But I would like to begin by giving you some time to talk about what happened within the Lost Wave community. So, if you would like to walk us through essentially, uh, what happened.
Yeah, well, that was a real awe-inspiring experience for me. On December 8th, in 2023, I received a slew of emails and direct messages on my social media, essentially telling me that a song I'd written about 20 years ago had been lost or deemed lost, a piece of lost wave media, which is essentially a song or a piece of media on the internet that has no attribution to it. People don't know where it came from, who the original author is. And they were indicating that I was a lost wave artist, that my song, How Long Will It Take, was deemed lost and pirated in a Russian bootleg DVD with no attribution. And someone from the Ukraine had posted on an online forum 16 years ago, I wonder who sings the song. And the internet became very curious. And eventually, a whole community, thousands of people all over the world, were dedicated to coming together in collaboration through a subreddit forum to try to find the original author and the entirety of the song, because there's only 16 seconds in the DVD menu. And so I got contacted by people when they shared that they had found me. Initially, I thought it was a scam when I was receiving all of these emails and DMs, and I just was not sure what was going on. But eventually, we learned that it was true. I actually had to go home, and I was out at the time when I started getting all these DMs and messages. And my eldest son, who's a techie, I actually called on him for his help to help me figure out what was happening. And then found out that it was legitimate and that there was a whole community. Rolling Stone magazine had written about it, and people were really coming together and collaborating so that they could find me.
That's such a fantastic story. I'm so happy to be a part of it because in case you didn't know, in the final days before How Long was found in 2023, I was just discovering the Lost Wave community myself, and this is one of the first big discoveries that I remember, being a part of the community. So you
Oh, so
mentioned,
can I just
yes, sure,
ask
go ahead.
you
Yeah.
how that experience was for you? Because I've spoken to a few Lost Wave members of the community in terms of their search, but how was that for you? Was it just like up to you to kind of unturn every rock, or was it kind of instructional, or how were they able to coordinate efforts?
Well, it's so hard to piece together, but at the time, like, I discovered Lost Wave entirely by myself. I actually think looking back, How Long was probably the first snippet I found. So I like it was probably the first search I'd ever heard about, and it was at first obviously it was the Lost Wave Reddit, and I remember people saying we are potentially very close to finding this song. This is like a I believe someone at the time called it a crown jewel. I wish I could remember who it was. But I remember asking a few people, tell me a little more about this, or unearthing posts from 10 years ago, and things like that about this snippet and like these dead ends people were going down. A lot of Lost Wave is independent search, but collaboratively, it's difficult to know how things happen. Usually, big steps are made in Lost Wave searches when people that know exactly what they're looking for have the time and space and resources to do it. I think How Long was found in a Canadian music registry somewhere.
Right. Yeah,
That's just
SoCan. Yeah.
because somebody knew exactly where to go and the search just got their attention. So Lost Wave was a fairly new concept for me at the time. luckily, like just a few days after I was properly discovering what it was and planting my roots in the community, I had an example of a fantastic discovery, which is, of course, How Long. And hearing these stories about almost like fiction, like something that's been lost, and there's like this decade and a half long search to try and find it, and slowly more and more is uncovered. And the fact that no two searches are the same, it's brilliant. And so much about the importance of the song and the search and the scale of the search, I found out after the fact, after it had been found fully. And I was just blown away because it is honestly, it's such a beautiful song as well. I'm sure you've heard it so much. But it was
I have
like
heard it.
it's just it's wonderful. So I'm not really sure if that answers your
Yeah, that
question, but it was unlike any sort of sense of community and belonging that I'd ever sort of felt before. And it was the fact that like I discovered Lost Wave myself, and yet in just a few days I was able to properly understand the community and sense of scale when your song was found. So there's that. It's I don't know. Lost Wave is an example of a discovery that was more of a coordinated effort. There are searches that were way easier than this, and I can't think of too many that have lasted longer. I know there was one search that lasted 20 years, but that's ended now. Um, so it really was like a huge event. I didn't understand the full scale of it at the time, but I was speaking with people who did, and I think that really helped.
Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. And it feels like I have these out of body experiences when I hear anybody talk about the experience because it's really hard to believe that it was a song that came from me. And also because I 3 years ago did my master's in applied positive psychology, and my final capstone paper was titled, well, it was essentially the subject matter of building well-being pathways for art-based museum social prescriptions to buffer loneliness and enhance well-being. And in my capstone, I was unearthing a lot of research in terms of how art is a conduit to social connection, but really like engaging in these behaviors of pro-social behaviors like social advising and being tolerating uncertainty and there's the element of awe and wonder that when we engage in awe and wonder, we can feel kind of smaller in the grand scheme of something really large and incomprehensible. But that sense of yourself feeling smaller isn't necessarily a bad thing because it really orients you towards being more pro-social and towards the collective. So what was wild was I was actually unearthing all of this research, writing it and weaving it into my capstone to build a well-being pathway to help create places of belonging. And in real time, this community was actually enacting all of those behaviors, them not knowing that I was writing my capstone and me not knowing that this search was going on. So on a whole other level of scale in terms of the awe that I have experienced from this, just bearing witness to actually what happened, like kind of stepping outside of my own body and world and kind of seeing this happen. And I was just like completely mind blown. And it totally makes sense that the mystery and the awe of the Lost Wave community and of the search itself is so indicative of how that experience could have been a positive experience for you all. And also like I got to know some of the members of the community and they were really like quite the moderators were very, very involved in making sure that it was a great place and a great experience. So all just like it's just such a wonderful, wonderful story on my end to hear how things evolved and to hear your experience as well. It's just it really brings me so much joy so thank you for sharing.
That's really nice of you. It must have been so overwhelming at the time. Can you imagine? This is completely unrelated, but can you imagine if the How Long had been discovered while you were writing that, while you were taking your masters? How
Yeah.
how might that have changed things if it
Oh
was
my
found
gosh.
fairly
Well,
soon?
I think during my master's writing the capstone, it was a very um it was I don't think I've ever gone so deep in so many areas of expertise and researchers from the social psychologies to positive psychology to even like I was learning about gut microbiomes and how that is related to, when we were more kind of socially connected and feel a greater sense of belonging. So all of these like, neuroscience, all of these areas that I wasn't an expert in, but I was really exploring all of these fascinating research papers and ways in which the arts is so implicated in fostering social health and physical health, mental health, and all of these areas. So I think it was such a big process for me to dive deep in those areas and then weave it together into this paper that when you're in the weeds, you don't really see outside of it. And I think if that experience, or if I had learned that that happened when I was writing my paper, I think it just would have given me that extra bit of confidence in knowing that this paper really matters. I mean, I definitely felt that when I was writing it already, that it was something that I knew that I wanted to write as um, sort of like an application plan for how to roll it out into the community. So I always had that in mind, but I think it would have given me that extra bit of confidence to know that absolutely, making art matters. Engaging in art matters. It matters for our social health, for our physical health, for our mental health. It is really there's so much research that's indicative of how engaging in the arts can actually improve longevity. So there's so many aspects of the ways that we can benefit, and the more that I'm learning about the research that's undertaking on arts prescriptions, the more that I realize that um, yeah, it makes sense that the community was so engaged in listening to music, not just my own song, but other Lost Wave media, like the awe that it really provoked, that sense of mystery. But also when we engage with listening to music very intentionally and not passively, like not like Muzak, where we're really listening to the lyrics and listening to the sound and the production and all the details, that there's a lot of evidence that supports that actually improves your well-being. So yeah, I think that would have been an incredible experience for that to happen at that time. It happened not too long after, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad that you have that confidence now. Honestly, what a, what a time. Um, just before how long gets out of sight, I think this is an important thing to sort of ground what the actual origin of how long was. So, you mentioned that it was recorded 16 years ago, but can you briefly run me through um, why how long was recorded and why it was made? Um, Maybe you'd also like to use this time to explain around that time the work that you've put out in the music industry. So
right,
this is your time to talk about talk us through that journey.
right. Well, I guess to start from the beginning, like to kind of backtrack in terms of like the origins of my music career, I actually was late to my music career. So I actually had a previous career in business and marketing and business strategy. And it was in during that time when I I had a bit of an ink, like it was just a whisper. It was a whisper that was telling me that I was not meant to be doing that and that I was meant to be doing something else. But at the time, I didn't know what that something else was. And so I ended up leaving my full-time job in marketing, and I I think I took out every self-help book that was like to do with like discovering your purpose. And so like what color is your, what's it called? What color is your parachute? Like all those types of books. And I was really exploring like, who am I? What do I value? What is my skill set? What are my curiosities? What am I passionate about? How can I contribute to the world in a way that feels meaningful to me? And so I was painting the walls of my apartment one day and just like really in this state of feeling disoriented in my life. And I bumped into my new neighbor, who was a singer-songwriter from France. And she had asked me if I was a professional singer because she heard me singing through the walls. And I said, no, I used to be in a band in high school, but I don't do it professionally. And she was like, oh, well, I just launched my second CD. I'm going to be touring in France. And out of, I think, sheer desperation for like trying to figure out, like finding something that I could do so that when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I didn't have this blank look on my face. I think I just blurted out half jokingly, like, oh, I should come with you and plan your tour and send backup for you because I have a lot of experience in event marketing. And um, so she looked at me and she was like, yeah, you should. And so I went on tour with her and I sang backup and we toured France. And when I got back home, I realized how much I missed being on stage. And I started doing open mics and industry people started hearing about my music and one thing led to another. And so that led to me actually fully embracing this artist side of me. I wrote a bunch of songs. I launched an EP. I was gigging 3 times a week, simultaneously working and doing marketing consulting on the side to pay for the studio record time, the recording time. And then I eventually did my full length. And during the process of recording my full length, I think it might have been in between my EP and my full length, maybe one of the first songs I recorded was How Long. And that song, after I performed it live one day at a gig, there was an executive that worked at Lionsgate Entertainment, and he said there's this made-for-TV film that him and his colleague are working on, and he was wondering if I would agree to giving them that song to place in the made-for-TV film. So I did. I gave him a copy of my master's and it got synced. It got placed in the film. And at the same time, there was industry people coming out to my shows and interested in my demos, and they were kind of sort of like radio testing it to see if it was going to get play. And if it got play, then they would get behind me as an artist. And that song got sort of like tepid response from the radio programmers. And so they never really got behind me or gave me a record deal. And at that time I thought, well, I kind of, it's unfortunate to say, but it did affect my confidence or my confidence in that song. And so I think that was, if I'm recalling back as to why I didn't place it on the actual LP, I think that might have played into it. And so it never officially got out there on the LP, Stay a While. And it was sort of like this orphan song that was in my catalog. And then it just was out there on TV and film, but never really out there on an LP, and it never made it to the streaming. And so that song, I think that's one of the reasons that it surprised me the most, that was the song that, well, it was lost and then it got discovered, and that I guess there was such a response to it from the community, because I was like, well, hold on, like I was told, almost 16 years ago that this song wasn't really like it wasn't a hit, quote unquote, a hit, and that people wouldn't respond to it in the way that it could be a hit. And then to hear that people rallied and like responded, and all of the DMs that I got from people who, is so heartwarming for me to hear that my music could impact people in that way. Like it just, I always hear other artists talking about that, but I've never actually experienced that. I mean, I've had people at the end of my show coming up saying that they like my music, but never to the scale of that degree. So yeah, it was a real incredible experience to learn that. And what it did for me was it made me really feel a lot more confident, not just in me making my music now, but me in producing any type of creative work. To know that what really matters at the end of the day for any artist, for any entrepreneur, for anyone creating anything, is to have that intuition. And when and it feels right with you, that people in the world will respond to it. And it's a very, I think people who create can feel that in their gut. And so to not let the outside forces sway what is good and what's bad, or what is popular and what's not, it doesn't really matter. If you feel really connected to it, then it's worthy of releasing it into the world. People will respond to it.
Yeah, that's
So
perfect.
just to answer the last part of your question, so since that point, what happened was I ended up I sort of officially stopped professionally making music at the time. I became a mom. So that those are my creative projects for, I guess, the 15, they're now 15 and 17. And during that time, I also had significant change in my life. I moved across the country twice now. The first time to be home with my family after I lost my husband. The children were my children were very, very young. And so my whole role was really making sure that they were well and that they were thriving. And in bits and pieces, I started to create and make music thanks to this godsend of a doctor and social care coordinator that supported me when my body was really very, I was in a lot of physical pain after the loss, and I had also lost my mother. And I just, it was preventing me from sleeping and moving and even nursing my son. So I went to see a doctor, and actually didn't go to see a therapist. My first stop was going to see a doctor to see what was going on. And so she did her whole, she questioned me, asked me a lot of questions to find out if I was living with postpartum depression. But I was really motivated and I was really engaged with my children. I wasn't really having problems sleeping other than due to the physical pain. And so she referred me to a social care coordinator. And this woman, Nicole, would come see me over an 8-week period. And she really listened to me and listened to what mattered. And she asked me what brought me joy. And when she learned that I needed to move my body and that I was a singer-songwriter, she referred me to a movement prescription and to a art prescription. She really encouraged me to start making music with my community again. And those social prescriptions were a game changer in my life. It really turned everything around. I started to feel way more self-empowered. I started to feel way more engaged, and the pain went away. And it really helped me to understand the power of being with others, but also playing with others, the power of play. And that experience of me playing with my children as well and entering their world of wonder really informed my whole perspective on resilience. And that when we engage in these moments of awe and wonder all throughout our day, these little moments here and there, they all can stitch together and help support us to move forward. So that I have created these little pieces of music throughout. Some of them are in real rough forms, like demos. Some of them are more fully done. And I'm in the process now of trying to write a book and launch the music at the same time that can really speak about that experience.
That's thank you so much for opening up about that. It's really it's heartwarming to hear your journey, honestly. In the 16-year wait between when How Long was released or was last seen to when it was rediscovered, and you obviously gained a new community and the things that have happened since. You've touched on it quite a bit, but I was wondering if because you've done a little more after that. You've done some public speaking. There is Ode to Wonder. Maybe you'd like to talk a little bit more about what else you did in that time. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, there are a lot actually. So I became an advisor for psychological health and safety in the workplace. Canadian Mental Health Association had this program to for training for advisors. And given that my background was actually in the corporate world, I really wanted to look at how can we support the workplace and employees within systems in the workplace so that people could feel more engaged, greater sense of belonging, and really thrive to so that they can experience, happy and satisfying life, but also from the perspective of preventative, preventative ways to nurture resilience and reduce stress levels. And my take has always been, as a caregiver for both my late husband and my brother who lives with a mental illness, was that the healthcare systems are very, very strained. So what can we do upstream to make sure that we are well and healthy so that people who are really more acutely needing attention get the attention they need in the healthcare, and that people who may be struggling maybe not to the same degree, but that there are resources within the workplace and in our communities that can support them, and that it can be preventative so that they never get to the stage where they need to access, that level of healthcare to deal with mental illness or physical illnesses. So it made sense for me to approach it from that perspective. And I did a lot of talking and speaking engagements on advocating for mental health. And I really believe that it was a very big barrier to getting access to help in any capacity if we can't really talk about what's going on and if people in our community don't really understand mental health. And so 16 years ago, when I started doing that, giving these talks or speaking and doing these keynotes, there wasn't as much, I guess, demand for services because people were still kind of coming out and little by little talking about it. But now, 16 years later, it's incredible to see. There's still work to be done, but it's incredible to see that people are comfortable, especially your generation, talking about mental health, which leads me to believe that we need way more resources that are out there beyond healthcare. And so I learned actually in your country that there was so much movement in the area of social prescribing. It was the birthplace in the UK of social prescribing, where doctors were now referring non-clinical patients experiencing mental health, but maybe not clinical. They might be feeling anxious, lonely, depressed, or experiencing other social determinants of health, like food insecurity or lacking employment, these things. But the community's always stepped up in these cases. But what they ended up doing was formalizing it into the healthcare system. So doctors were able to refer these patients to social prescribers or link workers who would then do what that woman Nicole did for me, was sit and understand the patient's needs and their interests, and then signpost them or refer them to community. And so I became very interested in this model because it made logical sense to me based on what I had personally experienced, but also what I'd experienced as a caregiver and learning the ins and outs and the fragility of the healthcare system and how we really need to work together from a strength-based perspective. So that's what led me to go back to do my master's in applied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. I was really understanding that strengths-based approach and really focusing on the area of social prescribing. And then finally, when I, just prior to actually going back to do my master's, I had started recognizing that in the workplace, putting together in Canada, we have what's called the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, which is voluntary, but kind of similar to ISO, but more on the psychological areas where you can go in and build these programs and reinforce psychological health and safety in the workplace. But I really felt like these programs needed a starting point where the environment felt fertile to be able to plant these seeds. And what was lacking was this sense of connection. And so I designed these, what I call wonder gatherings, based on my lived experience of engaging in playful ways with wonder, how there's this positive contagion that can happen when we experience awe and wonder, similar to what you experience in the Lost Wave community, where it really breeds this kind of pro-social way of working together, more creativity, more collaboration. And so I designed these wonder gatherings to really help people interact in more meaningful ways through stories of awe and wonder. And music sometimes is a component of it. People bring their songs of wonder and share their songs of wonder. And then I facilitate it in a way that people are then able to spot the strengths in the person sharing. And it's a really incredible experience. Often I bring tissues because people are moved to tears hearing other people, like not in a sad way, but just it's very moving to hear how people see the world in such beauty. And it's always an incredible experience to see it in the workplace environment with corporate, leaders and their employees, where typically in the workplace there's this power differential. But when I facilitate these gatherings, it's everybody comes together in a very human way. So I like to say that I put the human back into the human resources, that it's not just the system, it's like the humanity aspect of it. So I started working on these wonder gatherings, and now I've incorporated, with the help of some colleagues who also work in the music capacity and as a positive psychology practitioner, we've come together and we've started working on these music and wonder gatherings where Um, we perform, and then we talk about our songs, and we talk about why they were our wonders, and then we get everybody to engage in the wonder gathering experience. And it's been really, really, really meaningful. And I can see as a songwriter how there's that connection with the audience, but then I can also see from from a well-being consultant's perspective, and the person that founded and designed these wonder gatherings, how it's now working, and how I can see it in like experientially how people are able to connect in that way through music and through stories and through awe and wonder, and then knowing that there's a science behind it is really, to me, just fascinating. So that's been my work lately, and I'm also now the lead well-being consultant at the Vancouver Art Gallery, where they're launching Art of Wellbeing Lab, which is we're building an ecosystem and bridging the medical community, so doctors and scientists with Indigenous elders and artists, and all coming together to create programming to foster more social connection and increase, personal and collective well-being, societal well-being. And it's been an amazing experience. We just recently launched a nature prescription initiative where we are collaborating with PRX. So they're a nature prescription program where doctors can write prescriptions for nature park visits and experiences. And we have collaborated. So we have inside the Vancouver Art Gallery, Emily Carr's artwork, and it's all nature artwork. And so we've put together a self-guided a piece of collateral that people can now have when they get the prescription for the PRX. They also get a free visit for themselves and someone else to enter that space and view Emily Carr's artwork and kind of do this nature bathing experience. And then this guide has some prompts for slow looking and mindfulness and ways to really engage and connect with the art and really connect with how they feel when they're looking at nature, which can be really restorative, both in person and through art. So that's been extremely rewarding too. That's really recent because it was launched on World Health Day.
Yes, I saw you speak at the event there as well. It mustn't have been too long ago. That must have felt very rewarding. How long a process sort of was that? How long did that take before it reached a stage where it got the media attention and the progress that it has today?
Right.
How long did that take before something like that can launch?
Yeah, it was really, thank you for asking that. It was, so when I completed my capstone, I reached out to the director at the Vancouver Art Gallery, who's now the co-CEO, co-interim CEO of the Vancouver Art Gallery, Sirish Rao. And I let him know that I was exploring this body of work and this was my area of focus for my capstone. And when I completed the capstone, I gave it to him and he read it and was intrigued. And it was an area I think that was within his vision of where he wanted to see things and moving towards this aspect of improving societal well-being, as the Vancouver Art Gallery really being the fulcrum of that piece within Vancouver. And I'd also simultaneously reached out to Dr. Lem, who is really well known, not just in Vancouver and in Canada, but internationally for her work in nature prescriptions. And we started having these talks and walks on the beach and kind of envisioning, working together eventually. And I was eventually asked, excuse me, to speak at the Vancouver Art Gallery at this talk on the art of happiness. And Surish had asked me to come speak. And it was at that talk that I invited a few doctors that I built some relationships with. Dr. Lem was one of them. And after that talk, there was sort of this, back and forth between Sirish and Melissa and then me. And eventually it all kind of came together. And over the course of a year, after I was engaged with their lead well-being consultant, after a year, we started putting things in motion and launching it officially on World Health Day. So I'd say that it probably took about a year from ideating the collaboration to launching.
Wow, that's taken so much work, but it sounds like it was so worth it, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
as time moves forward, we'll really see the effects of that. It sounds like a fantastic little initiative.
Oh, thank you.
Something that I did want to ask. This is something that I don't fully expect you to remember. Firstly,
Yeah.
this is just something that you jogged my memory of. When we were sort of suppose, rediscovering for some, but also discovering Paula Toledo, following the discovery of, or rediscovery of How Long. One of the many things that we found was one of your old web domains. And among those, on one of the pages, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but there was a picture with the quote, I wonder, I make things out of nothing. Does that sound familiar? Where does that come from? This is more of a personal question, but it's stuck with me for over a year now. I'd like to know sort of like yeah, where did that come from?
That, I think that was sort of the early stages of, I had started, so my experience that I mentioned with how awe and wonder were really quite instrumental in helping my healing from, all of the losses, and playing with my children, playing with my son and entering his playroom and entering his world of wonder. I had these moments where, even despite the hardship and the despair and the grief, I would get locked into flow. And flow is when you probably experience it in your work, where you lose track of all time. And it's an incredible, so the science of flow is that it's a very highly rewarding experience. It's usually, we enter these flow channels. So um, there's a scientist, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who he he talks about how we enter these flow channels where all time seems to stop, and it's usually when our skill set and is just underneath what we're trying to achieve. So it's not too far, but it's sort of close enough that we're reaching to achieve this goal, and we have this level of consciousness that is so profound that we're kind of inside our body, outside our body at the same time. And it's a very rewarding experience. And I think because it was really difficult for me to set 20 minutes aside every day to play with my children, because I was so physically uh, drained and exhausted. And it was a really, really hard time for me. But I knew that I needed to do it because I knew that my eldest son needed to have a parent who was connecting with him. And so I would enter these flow states and all time would stop. And I would come out of his playroom feeling just, I would experience this joy, which I didn't think could happen in that stage of my grief. And it was an epiphany to me that you can experience hardship, but still have these positive emotions. And I started getting really curious about it. And I learned that there was a science behind it. There's a science called positive psychology, and that's what led me down that route. But what was fascinating was it was this form of contagion, almost like his wonder prompted me to open up and feel wonder for myself. And I started taking myself on these. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Artist's Way.
I haven't, no.
Okay, that's a really good book. I highly recommend you read it.
Sorry, who's that by?
Julia Cameron.
Okay.
So she talks about the importance of taking yourself out on an artist date. And so I started taking myself out on these artist dates where I would just go and explore Montreal. I went on these, like, I really love coffee, like these really like independent cafes. So I would try to find like the best coffee and the best cafe. And I would take myself to hear live music. I take myself out to dinner. I started writing about all these experiences, and they were called my Ode to Wonders, because I realized that with every one of these experiences, that it broadened me up even more. And there's also a science behind that too. There's a researcher by the name of Barbara Fredrickson that talks about this broaden and build concept, that when we experience these positive emotions like awe and wonder, that we open up, and we tend to be able to like add on these, it adds resources to our way of thinking and behaving when we can open up in this way, that positive emotions actually have a beneficial purpose in our life. And so I realized that it made me feel really happy and engaged with the world to write about these experiences. So I started this blog called Ode to Wonder, and there were all these moments where I was out on these artist dates, or sometimes they were really simple, like going to my hairdresser. I loved going there. The people were amazing. It smelled so great when I entered into the doors. It was so beautifully designed. They had plants everywhere. And it was, I also really love to write. So it became a very poetic, creative experience for me to write these odes to wonder. And when I think I put that banner together for, it was initially maybe on my Facebook, the banner for my Facebook page, potentially for Ode to
Right.
Wonder. If I think that might have been
Okay.
one of the uses, but it is wild how people can find things on the internet from, I tell my children, like, be careful what you put
Yes.
out
Yeah.
there, because
Yeah.
there is a way for people to track everything down. And
Well,
now with AI, it's going to be escalated.
that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that something about the Lost Wave community that's almost like an unwritten rule in a way is respecting the boundaries of the artists that you discover. And although like initially there is that being bombarded with emails and messages and things, um, there like everyone sort of knew not to encroach on your space too much. So like although we are able to find like pictures and banners and things using the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, and things like that. It's like the consensus is it's like don't go beyond that. You know, it's like it's things that essentially one search away, really, and things like that are permitted. But it was a point where we discovered okay, Paula has a website. There are pictures on it. There are groups on Facebook. We don't tend to go much further than that. We found how long we know the music that you did. Anything other than that is sort of intrusive in a way. But the Lost Wave community, because it's made up with so many authentic people that is just so fantastic at what they do, we understand that like the least that we want to do is like we've just done this wonderful search, this wonderful collaborative experience. We found this song. We don't want the artists to hate us by bombarding them or finding all of this stuff. So I can understand how overwhelming, perhaps unnerving it could be that these things are so easy to discover, going back years and years and years. But as long as it's the Lost Wave community that's behind it, there is, I believe, nothing to worry about because we understand space and boundaries and things like that with the artists that we work with and find. But so sort of other than the Vancouver Art initiative, which is obviously a huge accomplishment, I want to focus now on post 2023. So this is the new community that sort of discovered you all at once. The work that you've done in the last year, again, other than the Vancouver Art Gallery, and also looking forward to the future, bringing it forward, other ways that you're looking to connect with your audience. If that makes
Well,
sense.
that's a great question. I have so many ideas and ways that I want to connect. Really, there are songs that I have written that I would love to record fully in a recording studio and not in my little place where I record things. Just to do it professionally again in that capacity, I think would be wonderful. I started performing live again. So I had a couple of live performances in the last year, and I've been writing new music. And yeah, it's just, I'd love to be able to release some of these songs as well. I think I mentioned that I really want to write a book. So I want to write a book about the last 16 years and how I've used On Wonder to nurture my resilience and in the hope that it can help others who might be struggling or even not struggling, just even wanting to achieve a certain goal. Like at the time, I remember when I was setting out to write my music, I didn't really have a mentor to show me how, like, just a path or a way or some helpful advice to how does one achieve a lofty goal. And given now that my master's degree, a very, very big part of my degree, excuse me, a very big part of my degree was actually learning how to achieve, how to work towards a goal and what to do if you encounter some resistance or roadblocks. And I think through my life, I've had to figure things out the hard way, like how to work through those challenges and roadblocks. And what ended up working, I realized was actually what the science was saying in terms of these are the behaviors that you need to engage in if you want to set a goal. And so, and achieve it. So I would love to help the creative community within the Lost Wave world. I know that everybody has a dream and a want and a desire to achieve something in their life, whether it's personally or professionally, eventually in their what they want to do with work. Like for instance, yourself in broadcast journalism. And so when you reached out to me to do this interview, I was like, of course, I would love to help you. Because I think it's important that we have community and we have mentors and people that can guide us along the way. You know, I do believe that adage that it takes a village. And so that's one aspect is like nurturing the community to create and collaborate. Um, Also trying to get my own music and creative expression out there in the world would be really fulfilling for me as an artist, and building the community itself so that we can all stay in touch in some capacity. If there's a way that I can offer any helpful tips or advice, that would be great too. But yeah, just, creating art for art's sake too is really, really super rewarding for me. But now I'm learning, because of the work that I'm doing and the research that I've been exploring on the impact of arts on our health and well-being, I'm realizing that for me, I need to also embrace these things that I'm telling people, are really good for your health and well-being. So it's a bit of it's become now not just art for the sake of making art as an artist. It's now become art for the sake of making art and also for my own health and well-being. Like it's actually become a practice that I do, that I think about every single day. I think about, because I'm a solo parent and I want to be here for my children and my grandchildren, I think a lot about what are these health promoting behaviors. And I think about, did I get my exercise today? What am I putting in my body? I'm thinking about getting good quality sleep. And now two important pillars. And I've always really loved going for walks and being in nature, is like, yeah, getting that time in with nature and creating and making art and expressing myself and singing and making music and connecting with others. Like those are like, there's now 6 important pillars to my life as opposed to the 3 that existed when I was probably my 20s or 30s.
Paula, thank you very much for joining me. Happy 20th anniversary to Stay Awhile, and thank you everyone for listening at home.